All right, it looks like things are pretty stable, so I think we're ready to go. Hello to everybody that's just joined, and welcome to today's webinar. We all know that native plants are essential for supporting local ecosystems, including the many pollinators that depend on them. Creating and maintaining native plant habitat is a key action that is undertaken by bee cities. And in these efforts, some bee cities have even taken steps to propagate native plants to be used in local habitat creation efforts, which is really good. So today we're going to hear from staff members in Whitby and Guelph about their native plant propagation programs, including how they operate and how they support municipal goals and strategy. Um, One final reminder, French interpretation is available. To access French audio, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen and select French from there. And again, we would like to acknowledge and thank the Government of Canada for supporting English to French interpretation of this webinar. Before I introduce today's speakers, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land that Pollinator Partnership Canada resides on. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I know we are participating today from all across Canada, so we invite you to reflect on the land that you are on. Today, we're delighted to have speakers from both Whitby and Guelph. I'll introduce them more thoroughly in a moment, but we have Sarah Shields and Lindsay Alward from Whitby and Jay Cranstone from Guelph. Sarah Shields has more than 10 years of experience in the environmental management field. She holds a Master of Resource and Environmental Management from Dalhousie University and a bachelor's degree in zoology, where her passion for bees began through an introductory apiculture course. In her role as project manager, sustainability and climate change at the town of Whitby, Sarah leads key initiatives such as the Zero Carbon Whitby Plan, the Whitby Green Standard, and the Climate Emergency Response Plan. She also oversees the town's rooftop beehive, the native bee home installed in 2025, and the town's commitments under the Mayor's Monarch Pledge and Bee City Canada. Lindsay Alward is a results-oriented and dedicated senior manager with over 20 years of progressive experience in municipal operations, specializing in the management and maintenance of diverse parkland and green spaces. As the senior manager operations parks for the town of Whitby, Lindsay leads the team responsible for the strategic and operational excellence of all public park assets, sports fields, trails, cemeteries, and natural areas. She's focused on delivering responsible and exceptional public service through efficient resource management, innovative maintenance practices, and the implementation of long-term sustainable development plans. She's passionate about enhancing community well-being by ensuring Whitby's parks are safe, accessible, beautiful, and reflective of the community's needs. And Jay Cranstone joined Guelph's Forestry and Sustainable Landscapes team in 2019 after 25 years in private sector consulting, where he focused on policy development, master planning, and detailed design and construction management for municipalities, agencies, and private sector clients. Growing up in rural Wellington County, his fascination with nature led him to a BSc in ecology from Western University, followed by a Master of Landscape Architecture from the University of Guelph and full membership in the Ontario Association of Landscape Architects. His role with the City of Guelph includes leading planning and approvals for the naturalization program, selecting and procuring plant materials, assisting with crew work planning, and working with numerous community planting partners. I expect we'll have some time at the end for questions, so if you do have any questions, please type them into the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can. And with that said, that is enough from me. I'll turn it over to Sarah and Lindsay to talk about native plant propagation in Whitby.
All right, hello everyone. Can you guys see my slide okay? Fantastic. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Sarah Shields, and I'm here with my colleague Lindsay Allward, and we're excited to introduce you to the Town of Whitby's Seeds for Bees Staff Native Plant Propagation Program. This program is a part of the town's ongoing commitment to supporting pollinator health and biodiversity. Today, I'll walk you through the town's broader sustainability plans and how they support this program, and I'll pass it over to Lindsay for details on the program. Before we dive in, here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. I'll walk you through how this program connects to WIPY's climate actions. Next, we'll take a look at the town's climate emergency response plan, which outlines the town's priorities for reducing emissions and strengthening our local environment. From there, I'll pass it off to Lindsay to discuss the details of the Native Plant Nursery, and finally, we'll share details of our annual staff repotting event. So to start, I would like to give a brief background on Whitby's climate action to date. It all started back in 2019 when Whitby Council declared a climate emergency. In response, the town began implementing a series of initiatives to address climate change. In 2020, we introduced the Whitby Green Standard, aimed at improving sustainability in new developments, which encourages the use of native plants. In 2021, we developed the Zero Carbon Whipping Plan, which serves as the town's corporate mitigation plan to reduce emissions across municipal operations. In 2022 and 2023, we developed Phase 1 Resilience and Phase 2 Mitigation of Whitby's Climate Emergency Response Plan, which is our community plan to address climate impacts and reduce community greenhouse gas emissions. In 2024, construction began on the town's first zero-carbon building, the Whitby Sports Complex, which uses a geothermal system and will include pollinator-specific plantings and with all native plant species. In 2025, we began the development of our first corporate waste management plan. Each of these steps builds on the last, showing our commitment to tackling climate change both within the town's operation and across the broader community. Over the next few slides, I'll provide an overview of Whitby's Climate Emergency Response Plan. The plan is divided into two phases, as can be seen on the Venn diagram. Phase 1 focuses on building resilience, and Phase 2 on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You'll notice in the Venn diagram that there's overlap between the two phases. This is because certain actions like preserving nature, complete communities, and water conservation support both resilience and mitigation. These shared actions create synergies and maximize benefits. The implementation plan for Phase 1 resilience includes 4 pillars. The one that I'll focus on for this presentation is natural spaces, green infrastructure, and trees. This focuses on using nature-based solutions to reduce climate risk, things like conserving and expanding natural areas, protecting our urban forest, and using green infrastructure such as rain gardens and permeable surfaces. And this directly connects to pollinators. Healthy and natural spaces depend on strong pollinator populations to maintain our plant diversity and ecosystem resilience. Many of our green infrastructure projects also create habitat for bees and butterflies. So supporting pollinators isn't separate from climate action, it's a key part of building a more resilient Whitby. So this slide discusses some of the key actions we have been working on. A big part of our climate resilience work focuses on expanding and strengthening natural spaces, and trees play a major role in that. In 2024 alone, Whitby planted over 800 trees through LEAF's community greening program at our spring and fall planting events. On top of that, 384 trees were planted in the backyard tree planting program, showing strong interest and support from our residents. By expanding and enhancing our tree canopy, we not only provide shade, cooling, and community engagement, but we also create habitats that support pollinators and other wildlife. Building upon our progress discussed, the staff-led Seeds for Bees program focuses on growing native perennials, grasses, and shrubs to further strengthen pollinator-friendly habitats across the town. Together, these efforts help maintain biodiversity, connect natural spaces, and make Whitby's green infrastructure more resilient in the face of climate change. Seeds for Bees is a staff-led initiative where we grow native perennials, grasses, and shrubs from seeds to help maintain and expand pollinator-friendly habitats across the town. By growing these plants ourselves, we support local biodiversity, create more connected habitats for bees and butterflies, and help strengthen Whippy's natural spaces in a cost-effective and hands-on way. And now I'll pass it over to Lindsay to discuss how the program was started.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. Hi, everyone. You'll have to forgive me. I have a cold, so my voice is a little bit deeper than usual. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Seed for Bees program and how it started. I'm more from the operations side, so I do run like the horticulture department and the forestry department. So this was a staff-led initiative, like Sarah pointed out. So back in 2021, the town of Whitby did a really interesting initiative for staff to present projects. They sort of, I guess you can equate it to kind of like the Dragon's Den, where you kind of presented an idea and then senior leadership would vote on whether to support it or not. So in 2021, they presented the Seeds for Bees program to senior leadership under that format. And they were the successful submission. So they kind of, this was how we originally started it. They put the project together, they wrote a report, and they presented it, and they were awarded with $2,000 to bring the project to fruition and to get it started. I think it's the next slide, Sarah. So some of the goals, the reasons why we wanted to do this project was, I guess, all the things, all the corporate things. It aligned with the strategic plan, Whitby, the Whitby Green Standard that Sarah was speaking about. We also are a bee city and a tree city here in the town of Whitby. Operationally, we noticed that a lot of support was coming for tree planting and for meadows, but we weren't really getting a lot of support or funding when it came to native plants. And when we did, have money to purchase them, we were finding them difficult to source, and we were also finding that they were expensive and the quality of the stock wasn't always the best. I think this has changed a little bit in Durham region, but at the time that was the issue. So obviously we want to reduce the cost of everything, especially these days. We want to make sure that we're doing things in a way that's efficient. So the staff brought this forward, proposing that they would take this money, they would purchase some, pots and some lights and some seeds, and that we would start to grow some native plants ourselves. I think the goals really were, we did notice that we have a greater uptake in support if we involved the staff in the community. So that was also part of the report. So we got the funds for the pots and for the seeds and for the lights, and we set everything up in our yard. So obviously we're trying to enhance our natural heritage. We're trying to be in line with, the pesticide acts and all of the things that, and the pollinator, we have a mayor's pollinator pledge. So excuse me one second. That's better. We want to be in line with all of those things. So we got all of the resources. I think it's next slide. Okay, so we were finding that we had we had a lot in some of the newer parks that were developed. So we sort of identified some of those places as needing enhancement. Some of the newer plantings, maybe not as successful from the developers. It was a really good place to infill our planting. So this is a picture here of our outdoor nursery. It's not very fancy, but it's definitely successful. So a lot of the seeds we'll start inside, we'll bring them up, and then eventually we pot them up and leave them in this outdoor nursery. We did have a really long list of native plants when the project was developed that we wanted to undertake, but we were finding that they were not all successful, and it was easier for us to kind of stick to a smaller amount so that we could really propagate them successfully. Things were kind of all assigned at the same time, happening at the same time. So that's the list right there on the slide of the ones that we're mainly growing. We do have intention to start to harvest our own seeds and to start to diversify like the plant species that we're growing, but this just operationally is working for us. We are dedicating about 20 hours of staff time in the spring and then another 20 in the fall just to get everything set up and pot things up. We are also taking about an hour a week, just one gardener to, make sure that everything is watered. And I think part of the reason why we're being successful is we're not trying to do something huge. We're not trying to build our own greenhouse and, start this big, massive operation. We're doing something small and we're finding that it is having impact. So right here it says our first nursery crop of native plants were planted in the community in the spring of 2022. We also have been doing it every year subsequently. Next slide. So we have a park that's called the Whitby Park, which is really cool. So it's always fun to plant pollinators there. But this is just a list of some of the places that we've been planting our native species that we've grown. I think we might be a little bit longer than this now, but we definitely are focusing on those newer parks. They seem to be where we're having the most success and where we have the most space. There are items in our report to sort of try to reduce annual plantings and to replace some of the space in the annual beds with more native plants. I've been seeing us do that in the past 2 seasons. So this is interesting. It's leading to a sort of different ornamental style of bed. Next slide. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about this one, but I will. So every year, part of the report that we wrote and part of our program is to make sure that we're involving staff, not just in operations or in horticulture, but throughout the town. And we have partnered with the Health and Wellness Committee, and we, during Pollinator Week in the spring, we invite everyone to come and help us pot up all of the plants. And we just find that this provides an opportunity for staff to come together. It creates a lot of really good conversation around the table. And honestly, to be honest, if you're me, like I get a lot of the work done, which is great. And Sarah, are you taking over now or am I another slide?
I can take over now. Sorry, I was struggling with the mute button there. Sorry, Lindsay.
I'm losing my voice.
Okay, just 1 second. So looking ahead, we plan to grow the program by targeting areas that are prone to invasive species, helping to restore these species with native plants. We also identify other areas across the town that could benefit from additional native plantings to support biodiversity and pollinator habitat. Finally, public education and participation in community events will be key, so residents can get involved, learn more about native plants, and help support pollinators in their own backyard.
Yeah, part of our original proposal was to try to help to reduce the cost of invasive species removal, like preemptively before. Yeah. So yeah, that's the end.
Yeah, so thanks for taking the time to learn about our program. And if you have any questions or would like more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to sustainability@whitby.ca. We're always happy to connect and to share resources and ideas. And with that, we will pass it off to Jay Cranstone to discuss the City of Guelph's native plant propagation program.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can everybody see that?
Looks good to me.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you. My name is Jake Cranstone. I'm with the City of Guelph. I'm the Natural Area Stewardship Technologist in the Natural Landscapes team. And today I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on our native propagation program. I'm going to start with a little bit on the policy background, but then really dive into some of the details of our program, how basically on our annual cycle, and hoping that you'll get a few hints and ideas for how you might run a program or enhance the program that you're already running. So in Guelph, naturalization is sort of the backbone for all of the work that I do and our team does. And naturalization in the city really began back in the early 90s with a pilot program to just trial changing from turf areas to more naturalized settings in several parks around the city. And since that time, we've gradually built up the policy background and um, biodiversity, ecological protection, enhancement. They're all built into our master plans, like our official plan, our natural heritage system and strategy plan, strategic plans, our urban forest management plan, and our Guelph Parks Master Plan, among others. And one of the key documents is our natural heritage action plan. It was produced in 2018, and it contained about 40 recommendations under a number of different themes related to things like watershed management, natural heritage protection, community engagement, and restoration. And one particular recommendation in the plan really sets the foundation for our native propagation program. So recommendation to develop a program to support native plant propagation and seed collection to use in city maintenance and operations. So where did we get started? In 2019, we piloted with just a few seed packets that we purchased. And since then, we've expanded to about 5,000 native grasses and forabular wildflowers every year since 2021. In the photo in the top left, that's Chelsea Gray. She's our lead hand, so this would have been 2020. You can probably tell by the mask. And that would have been the first year that we actually discovered that rather than purchasing seed, we have a great wealth right in our own community. The photo on the bottom left is our greenhouse early in the season, where we're allowed to have a section of the greenhouse to get our native plants together and get them growing, and the program goes on from there. We learned pretty quickly just by traveling around the city in our parks, along our trails and so on, that we have a really fantastic local seed source. All the native plants that we grow, they're all grown from seed that we collect here within the city. And the photo on the bottom right is Dave Beaton, our program manager, in a great big mass of Monarda that we found on one of the sites. It's a bit of an optical illusion. They're not massive Monarda plants as big as his head, but it is a really nice patch. And a lot of that great seed source that we have is really, the credit to that goes to our environmental planners, who in specifications for contract drawings and documents for development, they were pretty sure to make sure that we had a good seed type in the naturalization mixes. So it's really given us a good basis to, a great seed orchard right in our own city. We also have what I consider to be a bit of a collaborative advantage, I would think. We're really fortunate that the forestry, horticulture, and natural area stewardship programs are all together under one single program manager. And horticulture and natural area stewardship were at one office location in Riverside Park. We already had some fantastic infrastructure, so we have some great greenhouses. And we also have a horticulture team that grows about 150 to 200,000 annuals each year for display beds and so on. And so they had a lot of expertise on starting seedlings and raising them and so on. So I'd like to walk you through now what we call our annual schedule. This is sort of our approach to doing things. It may be different for others that are, but wanted to share this with you. So the first stage is collecting and drying seed. So collection really begins in mid to late June, and runs through mid-November, mid to end of November, depending on when different species ripen. There are a few that start early in the season, in June, but really the focus is September and October. That's when we're collecting most of the seeds. We collect it and dry it. I wanted to say a couple words about responsible collection. So we collect all the seed within city limits. It's all collected on land that is owned by the city. But if you're out collecting on lands that is not owned by the city, or not owned by yourselves, it's important to make sure you have permission to do that, and collecting from different plants to make sure that you've got that genetic diversity within the species, and obviously not collecting all the seeds, leaving some there for nature to take care of and move them around and so on. So we store the seed heads in paper bags for a couple of months, and often, we try to collect on dry days and then also leave those bags open for a short period of time just to make sure you don't get mold on the seeds. So here's a few examples of some of the places that we are able to collect. So top left is one of our community pollinator gardens. So we have several of those throughout the city. Top right is what we developed in 2021 as one of our seed orchards. So it's a space within a park, where we planted out a lot of our native plugs for that year that were extras, and we've got a great place here now. We can collect a lot of seed in a very short period of time. Bottom left is another example of one of those spaces where we owe the credit to the landscape architects and environmental planners who really ensured a good seed spec with one of our restoration areas. So you can see a lot of diversity right in a small area, and a beautiful meadow that we have. And then the one in the bottom right is an area that was neither I would say planned or seeded to my knowledge. It is an area that's kind of a buffer in one of our large parks. But it's been colonized by a variety of native grasses, so big bluestem, Indian grass, switchgrass, and little bluestem. So we can collect all that we need of that particular seed in one very small and tight location. So cleaning and organizing the seeds, so working on that right now. No fancy equipment is required for that. And along the way, we've learned, there's different techniques for cleaning different types of species, different seeds from different species. We also learned that we're not in the business of selling seed, so they don't have to be perfectly clean. So when we pass it off to horticulture, there is some debris in the seed, but it doesn't really matter. It all works. And the other thing that we've learned is to keep the debris. So we don't throw anything away. The debris still contains a lot of seed. So we are actually taking that out and spreading that into some of our meadow areas and some of our enhancement areas. So here's a shot of our cleaning kit. It includes a set of nesting screens with different mesh sizes that we built just with some scrap lumber and some pieces of different size screens. It sits on top of a tub to receive the screened seed so that it's not blowing and flying all over the place. We also use coarse sandpaper for certain seeds that need to be scarified. A wood block for crushing some seeds. You want to have a gloves and dust mask to deal with some of the prickly and dusty seed. And then one of my favorites is the lasagna pan that we use for winnowing the seed. So just flipping that up a little bit in the air and getting rid of some of the light chaff and letting that float away. Stratification, early January. Some species don't need stratification, like the grasses. Some species need scarification, so the seed coat needs a little bit of a rubbing to rough that up. And then the clean seed goes into a soil mix, into Ziploc bags and into the fridge for 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the species. And we do a number of single species pots, but we also quite by accident got into multi-species plug pots. So here's a shot of it's just basically a Tupperware bin with a mix of sawdust, a little bit of potting soil, a little bit of garden soil, and an upland seed that's been stratifying for about 8 weeks. You can see that it started to germinate, so it's probably a little bit long in this stage, but we know that it's going to be successful based on what we see. So the multi-species plugs, we sow them directly into plug flats. And the photo on the left is 7 to 10 days after sowing, and you can see the germination is coming along nicely. And then the right is a few weeks after sowing, and you can see that there's multiple species in those pots, and they've developed a good deep root system to get them started. And so sowing the spring crop, we hand that over to horticulture in early March. It gets started. We usually start them on trays on heated bench, but we do have to move them out because we also are sharing the space, obviously, with horticulture, and they're dealing with species that are a lot more temperamental in terms of germination and requirements for heat and moisture and so on. One thing that we learned is that germination is really variable, so you've got to be patient. You don't get everything coming up like a standard annual crop. Transplanting seeds early to mid-March into larger pots in some cases. Sometimes we leave them in the larger plug pots until they go out into the field. It's great because we can get a crop, from in about 10 to 12 weeks from the time that it's sown. And that works really well with our own schedule for other projects that we have on the go, and then schedule in the greenhouse with the annuals that are being grown. And we have learned a lot of lessons along the way about watering and fertilizing and certain species. They don't. We try not to actually add fertilizer to the native species. We find that they're more successful that way. Hardening them off in the cold frame. So in late March or early April, we get kicked out of the greenhouse, so to speak, because the annual program, horticulture is up potting into larger pots. They're potting into their hanging baskets. So the space is really at a premium in the greenhouse. So we move out to cold frames. Again, this is infrastructure that was already in place. It wasn't really being used that efficiently. We did a couple of modifications to it, added a heating cable underneath, and it works really well to get us through that last part of the winter. And then planting out in early spring, so it's late May into June after the danger of heavy frost is passed. And we pass these along to our community gardens. We use them at our community plantings. Our crew plants them at various project sites that we're working on. And we also share them with our park stewards for work that they're doing in their own parks. We're saving and reusing the pots and trays whenever and wherever we can. And we also find that we have lots of extra seed because you can collect enough seed in a very short period of time to grow 5,000 plants. So what we've been doing is a couple of different things. One is we do broadcast that seed this time of year in some of our naturalization areas that we've been working on, but we also package up a small amount of it and use it for handouts at various events and so on. The envelopes we get at Staples, and then the labels we made those ourselves. It's got a little bit of information about the species, but more importantly, it's got a link on there to our stewardship email at the city so that we can try to encourage more involvement. We did try this year for the first time a summer crop. So basically this is a second crop that we start in end of April, and we're sowing those directly into the plug pots or into the larger pots, and they grow outside. We don't have those in the greenhouse at all. We just share some space at our holding compound area that we use for our tree and shrub species that we're planting out. And this technique, this summer crop, works really well for the multi-species plugs. Here's our species list. It's a pretty extensive list, but I wanted to point out that we have core species. So there's a sort of a top 10 list that we find that are really easy to grow, really perform well. So we grow mostly those species, and then we have some supplementals that we grow less often. Some of those are still pretty easy to grow as well, but they're less common. So we're trying not to put them everywhere. We've tried several other species that aren't on the list, but we find that germination of those can be unpredictable, and we have mixed success getting them to be plantable. So we're trying to stick, as Lindsay pointed out, we're trying to stick with those ones that we find that do grow really well, and grow on well. We have an upland, a lowland, and a woodland edge mix. And we grow far fewer species of the lowland species and the woodland species than the upland. And we don't grow any emergent or submergent species. And for the woodland species, we're focusing only on what I would consider more edge type species. We don't get into the ephemerals like bloodroot, wild ginger, and trillium, and so on, because the timing for the seed collection on those and seed storage is really quite finicky. And most often they require double stratification and a couple growing seasons to get to a plantable size. So if we have projects where we're looking for some of those, we will buy those. We may get there one day, but we're focusing on the ones that we know do quite well. So that's our sort of our calendar. I wanted to just end off with a little bit on challenges and opportunities. Awareness and acceptance is something that we're still dealing with here in Guelph, though we've got a great community and a lot of community buy-in. We still do have places where we do bump into some issues with acceptance, and this is one of those examples. It's one of my favorite spaces in the city. It's at our Emergency Services Center. It's quite an interesting building from an architectural point of view. And when it was planned, it had a pollinator garden out in front. So what you don't see here is you don't see the more traditional landscape space beyond between the building and this meadow. So there's a parking lot and sod and traditional species and so on. But this was originally planned as a pollinator garden. And we found out that the folks inside the building, the tenants, would have rather seen it just turned back into turf. So we were fortunate to have the opportunity to work with a great partner, Pollination Guelph, who's adopted this space, and they worked quite hard to add enhancement plantings, to harvest seed heads, and so on. And it really has become a fantastic space in our city, but there still are some of those challenges. Also, we try to be thoughtful with how we are incorporating native perennials into our more traditional display beds. So the photo on the left is an example in one of our main parks where a large planting of hosta was taken out and replaced with native species. So you can see here that we've chosen a couple of pretty robust species, so that stand up well on their own. They don't flop over. They've got good form and texture. So it still has that sort of mass planting appeal as opposed to the very scattered meadow look. So we're trying to do that in certain places in thoughtful ways. And the example on the right is another similar space along one of our major trail systems. We just planted it this spring, and the photo on the right was taken about a month ago. So it needs another year. It's going to look great next year. The first year, they're always a little sketchy looking, but it require more maintenance. But wanted to point out that what we've done here is, again, we focused on massing, so limiting the species, but focusing on large masses to sort of mimic that more traditional look that you get in a display bed rather than a meadow. We've got lots of spaces in the city where they are more naturalized and scattered meadows in appearance. But for those locations, we've tried to keep it a little bit more formalized. Having confidence with the species selection. So growing the species that grow well for you, know what you're looking for, where to find it. Learning along the way. We're always learning new tips and tricks. I was at a seed cleaning seminar earlier this week with Mary Gartshore, and gosh, I learned so many new techniques on how to deal with seed and how to clean seed. But then also considering looking and working with partners. As I mentioned, we have a great partnership with Pollination Guelph. We share some seed, we grow some plants for them, we get lots of expertise for them, and they've helped us along the way with our program. And then the last is scaling up. So we're at about 5,000 plants a year, and we feel like that's sort of our good, comfortable spot. We don't feel like we could scale up much further and still have this as not a main program. It's one of our minor programs. We fit it in with our schedule that works well with the schedules that staff have for other assignments that they've got to do throughout the year. So we don't feel like we can at this time we can scale it up any further. We're quite comfortable with that. But one opportunity might be to involve partners. So involve partners with expertise on identification of species, collecting species, cleaning the species, and even helping care for the plants might be a way that you as a municipality or an agency can build and expand a program. So just to wrap up, a few key takeaways. It doesn't require a lot of seed. You can collect all the seed that you need in a very short period of time and in a very, very small space if you know what you're looking for. Some species we found are easier to grow than others, so we're sticking with those. Every year is different, so you get different bloom, different quality of seed each year. Getting to know what you're looking for and where to find it. Start small. Go for a diversity of species if you can, and as I mentioned, find collaborative partners and be patient and persistent with it. It doesn't always work. We've had lots of little failures along the way, but it's really the program is really coming along nicely now. And if you're looking to incorporate into display beds to raise awareness, to get citizens that are using areas regularly more engaged with native species and pollinator plants, incorporate them in thoughtful ways in the traditional design beds rather than wholesale changes right away. So that's a summary of our program. As I mentioned, we've learned lots along the way, and we're always keen to learn more from others. And if there are certain questions or conversations that you want to have either here or afterwards, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Jay, Sarah, and Lindsay for the presentations. Very cool programs and really interesting to get the behind the scenes of how the programs work and how they fit broadly within municipal goals. Hopefully, these programs are inspiring to other municipalities and provide some tips on how to go about native plant propagation and also how these programs can support municipal goals. So it looks like we do have a good kind of 10-15 minutes for questions. If anybody does have questions, I'm just going to check. You could put them in the Q&A or just in the chat box if anybody has questions. I see a comment from Sue about a question about multi-species selection. But so the question is, how do you choose the species to plant together? And have you ever considered growing milkweed? And I guess I can throw that out to whoever would like to answer.
Sure, I can start. With the multi-species pots and plugs that we're growing, we generally like we have an upland mix, a lowland mix, and a woodland edge mix. I showed you the plant list. So we're really focusing on those core species for each of those mixes, and I think diversity is a good key. So we're putting a lot of those in varying quantities into the bulk stratification bin. And then when you sow them out, you're getting a mix of the mix. So um, every one of the pots is completely random. One of the things that we have learned is there are a couple species that we don't put into those mixes because they are pretty dominant and aggressive. And a great one is the evening primrose. So because it's biennial, it grows really quickly. It's a really heavy feeder. It tends to take over those pots. So that's one that we don't put into the multi-species pots. Well, that's one of the mistakes that we made early on and learned along the way. Milkweed, we do grow milkweed both in the single species and in the multi-species pots. So common milkweed, butterfly weed, and swamp milkweed. Growing it as a single species is one of those that we've found to be kind of challenging actually in the greenhouse. It comes up really quickly and looks great for the first couple of weeks. But then after that, it tends to peter out. So we're still trying to learn how to successfully grow milkweed from seed. If you just sow it directly, it seems to do quite well. And we're thinking it could be a combination of the watering and even the soil mix. So milkweed in its first year, it doesn't really do a lot. It grows a little bit, but it really seems to focus on that root system. So even though they look like they're, withering and dead at the top of the pot, we've even saved some of those and just set them aside and found that the next year they really come along nicely. So they're a bit of a challenging species from our point of view.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, any would be Sarah, if you wanted to add anything onto that, or Lindsay, feel free, or I can also hop to the next question. No need to.
Yeah, I think that was a really wholesome answer. I think the only thing I would add is that you do have to think when you're replacing traditional beds that you do have to think of your species like when they bloom. You want to have as much seasonal interest as you can. This like helps if they're pretty, people are more likely to accept them.
Yeah, that is a
I saw
great point
there's
too.
I saw there's some other questions. So
So the next one I can throw out, do you perform any mowing on more mature natural sites, or do you try to mitigate woody shrubs from moving in?
I mean, for us, we're more doing it in like more of a bed setting, and then we allow it to naturalize. So no, we're not doing mowing in for the native plants. There is meadow management if you're doing more of the grasses that you can apply. But no, I think you want to, for in a municipality especially, you want to make it so that it's not too much work. But I don't know, Jay, if you guys are doing any mowing in those fields that you were showing.
So we do have about six larger meadow areas scattered throughout the city, and part of the reason for this is that we recognize that woodland and woodland edge is important, but meadow is equally important for many reasons. And we're learning on this, so we have done some trial mowing in these meadows. So mowing a portion of the meadows on a cyclical basis, and not mowing the entire meadow area all at once, just so that we're not taking down everything. And part of that was also brought on by the need to control invasive, particularly buckthorn in a couple meadow areas. We do have a buckthorn treatment program, but we wanted to try this in this meadow area to see how that worked as a management technique, and also how mowing occasionally could enhance the species diversity of the herbaceous plants that are there. So we started that program in 2022, and with the 6 meadow areas, we've sort of gone around through the cycle on all the meadows once, and we're just sitting back now, trying to determine when the next year we'll start the cycle up again. But we're really interested to see if it makes a difference in terms of the diversity or even the mix of herbaceous species that are there.
Great, thanks for that. Seeing another question from Kate Anderson with Centre Wellington. And she says a few of them are planting natives as volunteers, but have yet to convince the municipality to see that as a priority. They give feedback that staff are strapped and cannot take anything else on. I'm just wondering if there's any suggestions for how to get buy-in on this.
My suggestion would be to get to know your township's like strategic plan. A lot of these sort of initiatives align with what they're putting in those plans and what they're approving. Also, you really want to make it easy. I know that's why it's really good to work with organizations like LEAF, because they make it really easy for us as the municipality to work with them. So they'll organize the volunteers, they will source the plant material. These are all things that take time for us. So maybe if you look at them, like sort of how they're structured, and if you can structure yourself like that. Also, municipalities can give support in other ways where they can, help you to prep an area. They can supply mulch at the end of it. These are not as impactful as them going and putting in the species themselves. Another point I would make is that a lot of the times a group will come to us and say, oh, we want to plant a pollinator bed. Oh, it's such a great idea. But really for us, that means a lot more work in the future. So a lot of people are really into planting, but not really into maintaining. So if you were to kind of present that you will make like a multi-year commitment to doing whatever maintenance is required, or putting it in an area that doesn't require a lot of maintenance, I think that would really strengthen your case. That's just my experience.
And I could add to that as well, and agree with Lindsay on having the policies in place through those various plans really gives you something to point back to and the mandate to have those. So if you don't have those master plans, visionary plans in place, consider developing those, or even getting key points into other plans that are being developed. So we have them woven into lots of different plans. And similarly here in Guelph, we through our community gardens program and our park stewards program, both of those involve volunteers, and both of those groups, they're always keen to receive pollinator plants for their vegetable gardens. They know that it attracts more insects for better food production. And then we have a program called Park Stewards, where a group of neighbors can get together and do stewardship activities in their parks, which we support with plant materials, some expertise, and mulch and so on. So it's a way to, I guess, stretch what you're able to do by getting the community involved, and that sort of it's got a trickle up effect by influencing others around, and council hears about it and so on, and so they become more supportive. That's been quite successful for us, but it is important too to kind of figure out the scale that you can handle. So our program, it may seem like we do a lot and we devote a lot to it, but we've been able to weave it in with everything else that staff is doing. We've got staff that are quite keen on the native plants, so they've got this buy-in already, and they do a great job of just fitting it in with other things that they're able to do, and I feel like we get quite a bit accomplished.
Perfect. That's really helpful. I'd say we have questions, time for probably a couple more questions. So the next one I'll put out there. Could you share what soil mixture you use for propagating seeds and what types of equipment you think is essential?
We just use a regular potting mix, but I would say, what was the second part of the question? Sorry, I can't find it.
The first part is
Oh,
what
the
soil
tools that are,
mixing? Yeah.
yeah, not a lot of tools. That's what's great about this program for us. Like I was saying in the presentation, and when things are a little bit tighter, this is a really good program that's not so impactful on the budget. You need some pots. Um, we got some lights. We would like, a fridge, but you don't need it. We actually put ours right in the middle of our parking lot, just on a green area, and it works great. So I would say that's sort of the advantage of this type of program. You can, like Jay was explaining, you can get your own seeds, you can plant them. You really just need trays and pots and some soil. And we have lights too. Yeah.
And I would say that we're the same. So we're, reusing the pots that our horticulture team, get their plant deliveries in for their annual program. There's certain pots that we found that we really like. Um, we're using the trays wherever we can. In terms of other equipment, I showed you our, super sophisticated seed sorting method. It's all homemade, basic stuff with bits and pieces. So you don't need any fancy equipment. We're really lucky that we have the greenhouse with the lighting and the heating and so on, and we happen to have the cold frames that we're able to use. So that's really given us a lot of flexibility in what we can do and how that works in with the horticulture schedule and the greenhouse and so on. The question about soil mix, we've tried a number of different things. Typically, we're using just a typical potting, like a soilless mix that horticulture uses for the hanging baskets and so on. But we do find that certain species they don't do as well in that mix. So we've tried mixing in things like living soil. Um, with the stratification of the bulk, the multi-species in that bin is a little bit of spent potting soil mix from hanging baskets, a little bit of garden soil, a little bit of sawdust, um, and even a little bit of the leftover chaff, the debris from the seed cleaning, just to give it a bit more aeration. But it's something definitely like you'll learn along the way that to there's not one magic soil mix, or at least we haven't found it yet.
Great. Thanks for those responses and really appreciate just how accessible it makes doing these types of programs. Um, so I see we're just about at the top of the hour. So that is all the time we've got for questions. Thank you so much, Sarah, Lindsay, and Jay, for providing such great overviews of these native plant propagation programs. Uh, Thanks as well for everybody who took the time to join. Hopefully you learned lots about native plant propagation and perhaps are feeling inspired to apply these learnings in your municipality if you're in a position to do so. The webinar was recorded both in English and also in French. So we'll get both versions of this up on the Bee City Canada YouTube channel later this week, and we'll send out a follow-up email with both of those links. And that concludes this webinar. So I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day, and stay tuned for upcoming Bee City webinars in the new year. Thank you.